As 2020 began, Comcast was riding high. The company finished out 2019 with record broadband subscriber growth and had recently broken ground on a new Universal theme park in Florida. Cut to March 2020. The pandemic took hold, temporarily shuttering the company's theme parks and halting film production for NBC Universal. The company's new streaming service, Peacock, then scheduled to launch within a month, now faced an unpredictable new variable. However, lockdowns would also bring a public eager for entertainment and the internet. The company leaned into Peacock and Xfinity Flex and was the first to bring new release movies straight to homes while accelerating its commitment to connect low-income families to the internet. By the end of 2020, Comcast Cable had netted 2 million broadband additions, Peacock's initial subscriber signups well exceeded expectations, and NBC Universal and Sky were restructured to position for long-term growth. Now, as the pace of vaccinations increases, the company is looking toward the Tokyo Olympics, the full reopening of theme parks, including a new resort in Beijing, and trend lines suggest continued rapid growth for broadband consumption. With this backdrop, I sat down with Brian Roberts, CEO of Comcast, to talk about innovation and reinvention in the midst of a crisis and how he sees the future of his industry. Well, Brian, it's great to see you. Thank you for being here with us.
Great to see you, Ben, even if it's virtual.
Brian, I want to start by taking sort of a long look back at the history of the company. And, you became president of Comcast, I believe, in 1990, a year when the company did about $700 million of revenue. The last few years, Comcast has generated $100 billion a year. When you step back and think about the long arc of the company and your career, what are the things you think that have made the company successful and allowed you to succeed as a CEO?
Well, it's been an amazing ride, and I can't be proud enough of where the company is today. I guess as we have core values, I would start with we believe in growth. We're trying to be in businesses that are growing. We're a more exciting new product company. We keep evolving and changing and transforming ourselves. We're not the same company today that we were 25 years ago, even 5 years ago.
Maybe you could talk a little bit about the folks who have been big influences on you and your career and helped shape Comcast's success over time.
So maybe not everybody knows, in 1963, my dad sold his men's belt and cologne business, and two gentlemen came to him. One was Julian Brodsky, one was Dan Aaron, and together they went out and started in Tupelo, Mississippi. My dad was the founder of the company, and those were the first two people he hired. And together they went off and built what is today Comcast. He thought about the name in the beginning, communications and broadcasting. And amazingly, many decades later, we were one of the largest communications companies and one of the largest broadcasting companies from 1,200 customers in Tupelo, Mississippi. But as I think about others in the business, a seminal moment was when Bill Gates saw the pivot coming to the internet and what personal computers could mean to people's homes. And we asked Bill to invest $1 billion in Comcast to help us convince Wall Street that putting fiber optics all over the nation would lead to what today we call broadband and have the best network. There's many others, John Malone and Barry Diller and Julian Brodsky, who played an important role in my life. But I've been lucky because I've tried to learn from those who came before me.
Brian, as you know, there's been a long debate over the role of content and distribution within a given media company, and whether that's the right structure for shareholders. Comcast, really beginning with the NBC Universal acquisition, became probably the largest vertically integrated media and communications company out there. That's going to be even more important as you think about the streaming world ahead. Why do you think content and distribution together creates value for shareholders?
We've seen from the early days, back in let's say 1980, when CNN and HBO really took off. In the early days, we were a broadcast antenna service, community antenna. Then we went to cable TV. Now we go to broadband and now streaming, and many iterations of things in between and hopefully to come with mobile. And content has powered that all along the way. So we see the two working together, and we're growing our ability and technology with one platform, working together as one company the content distribution, and now aggregation and streaming in a way that I think puts us in a very unique and different position than some of those other companies. It also comes down to we've believed in media and technology, and that's how I think of the current Comcast. That's how I would define us. We are a media and technology company, and those two go together. It's not really vertically integrated. It's delivering to customers and viewers experiences and memories and things like our theme park, and it relates to the characters and the intellectual property that they're in love with and their kids love.
I can remember all the years, and I'm sure you do too, where cord cutting was sort of this thing people would talk about. It wasn't really happening. And like everything else, it goes from not happening to happening, and Wall Street goes from not paying attention to obsessing over it. But you as a company that was sort of born out of the cable television business, where video is core, how did you guys handle what was clearly a disruption to your core business? Was there a moment in time when you realized that that Comcast had to pivot and pivot quickly?
Well, I guess I would pick one moment. I think it's 2008. We went to the Consumer Electronics Show. This was before there was a tablet, before there was streaming, before a lot of things. And we said, here's what we're going to try to build. And we called it Project Infinity. And we said we'd like consumers to have infinite choices of any content that has ever existed or might exist, and leave it up to the IP rights holder to determine whether it was free, advertising supported, subscription, pay-per-view, whatever model fit their business. In fact, at some point we changed the name of the company to Xfinity, which really had its roots in that CES presentation. I think another critical moment was when we put Netflix on our X1 device, and there was a lot of consternation. Was that the right business strategy? What should we do? And today, more people in our towns where we have X1 use Netflix than any other streaming device. And Netflix has praised us on their earnings calls, and we're appreciative of their incredible content. And so when you say cord cutting, I sort of think of it's just a transformation.
Was there ever a moment internally where folks asked and said, maybe we should hold off on this because this is going to disrupt kind of our core business?
I did. You sit there and it takes a while to digest. But so it goes back to culture of, do you have people sitting around a table challenging each other, or is it hierarchical? Our culture is very much distributed. That goes back to my father. And we had to prove that we could evolve our company. We've done it with Wi-Fi. One time, Steve Jobs said to me, you should consider putting Wi-Fi in all your cable boxes. And I honestly wasn't sure exactly what he meant. But I can tell you, we were pretty quick. We have no more Wi-Fi than any company in America, and we put them in our cable boxes. So sometimes you get great ideas from all over the place, friends, competitors, other outside influences. And I think it's important that you have a culture that you really try to rip up your playbook every day and make sure you have the right playbook tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, I bring up that Netflix example a lot because I feel like it was an incredibly short period of time, Brian, from when you were negotiating, I think, a peering agreement and it sort of spilled out into the public to bundling Netflix into Comcast bundles.
I give Reed Hastings a lot of credit. We both reached out to each other and said we didn't want to have any more disputes. We wanted to figure out how to go forward. And he came to Philadelphia and I went out to visit him, and we took long hikes. And one day we, with the help of many other people in our companies, broke a new ground that today we have Amazon and Apple, we hope, and we have Disney Plus and HBO, and we have Peacock. Some is our own, some are long-term partners, some are new relationships. And in all ways, we want to say to those companies, we are trying to find win-win outcomes. And that can be hard at times, and you can have tension in relationships. And the key is to try to navigate that and have a company that when you finally agree on something, you deliver. In fact, you over-deliver. And I think that's what happened with Netflix, and I think Reed has gone out of his way to acknowledge that.
Brian, I want to switch gears to the pandemic and the last year. I think for the most part, Brian, you guys, you sort of really plowed ahead on a lot of these things over the course of the year. Did you ever think about tapping the brakes more just to try to, sort of hunker down? Or did you feel like these were important opportunities that the company should continue to press on with?
So when the pandemic happened, it really created a moment that our broadband had to perform at a level that was never probably anticipated by many, but thankfully by a lot of our engineers, and it worked really well. Then when the George Floyd moment occurred and there was a lot of social unrest in the country and discussion of Black Lives Matter, what was Comcast able to do, and how did we handle that kind of second crisis in just a few months? And I'm really proud that the fact that, first of all, we've been thinking about digital equity. And so we committed $100 million to social justice organizations. We promoted Delilah Wilson Scott to be the new chief diversity officer for the company. But at the same time, we thought about digital inclusion and the digital divide. So 40 million of that 100 million is for things like Internet Essentials, which we've been at for 10 years. And now 10 million people have availed themselves of a very affordable broadband with about a $10 a month product. And we also created 1,000 lift zones. We're in the process of doing that, where people who don't have the internet can go, school kids, folks who want to work or learn, where the internet's free. So we've been very focused, both individually and as a company and as a family, wanting to think about how we can take this moment and make it something that, as we look back, we feel like we contributed and helped, and we're all learning as we go.
Yeah, I'm sure you would agree. The value of internet connectivity was always, high in society, but COVID has just supercharged that. Do you think that the role of the cable company or the ISP has fundamentally changed kind of permanently?
Well, it's important to everyone's life, and we're 24/7 on trying to keep the network up. And we published recently a number of statistics we had about 2 years of growth happen in 90 days. And we had invested $15 billion in building infrastructure that at times people, well, what's the payback? What's this? We believed that what you do with your internet is going to change. And I believe that today. I think 10 years from now, what we're doing will look nothing too close to what we're doing today, just as today doesn't look a lot like even 5 years ago, let alone 10 years ago. And a big part of that was saying we are a broadband company first and a video company second as a cable, whereas all those years we were video first and broadband didn't exist. And so I think we made that pivot. The cable leadership team saw this coming. We just didn't see a pandemic coming, but we saw increasing usage, 30 to 40% more bits per home every year for the last 20 years.
And one area, Brian, that the company didn't pull back on, even though it was generating losses, it was Peacock at NBC Universal. And Jeff and the team have clearly decided, it seems to us out on Wall Street, really decided to double down or triple down on that business here in early 2021.
Well, NBC Universal has been about, and NBC in particular, about broadcasting, and all the cable networks have been what we used to call cable casting. And that the way you're now getting that is through streaming and other creative applications. And so we own a third of Hulu, and Hulu's been very successful and keeps growing. And when Disney bought Fox, they ended up with 2/3 of Hulu instead of a third. And so we needed to come up with a new avenue. So we needed to get out of the blocks fast. The Peacock team has done a wonderful job getting over 30 million signups in less than 7 months. That's not something we should take for granted. And that's given us a great beginning from which to now build on that platform. And advertising and lower price points and free have gotten us off to a fast start. So why is it important? Well, you talked about cord cutting, and I think it's pretty obvious that the value is direct to consumer can continue to create value globally. The future looks pretty promising. You do have to have losses in the beginning, and I think investors now understand that and encourage that if you have a sensible plan. So we needed to take that first important step and say, well, with the 100-year Universal Library, the 50-plus years of NBC and 75 years of their catalog and great shows like The Office, like the Olympics, like the Super Bowl, what can we do to both promote and create a Peacock experience that is different than other streaming services?
You talked about your father and the role of family, and Comcast, I think, has about 170,000 employees now. You're now a global company. You after the Sky acquisition, you've added employees over in Europe. Having been there all along, how do you ensure, if you can, maintain a somewhat family like culture at a company that has gotten so large and in many ways far-flung geographically?
Well, we've been a very decentralized managed company from day one. When Tupelo, Mississippi came into my father's life, he didn't move to Tupelo. He stayed in Philadelphia. So I think my job, as we've gotten larger, is to keep those original core values that is like a family, where you are open and honest. There's always a little bickering, but in the end, you come together and you close ranks. And I think Comcast has done that for 50 plus years. We've had over, 17% compounded on the stock since we went public in 1972. And we've done it by thinking, well, if you owned it all yourself, what's the right decision? And we constantly ask the leaders to make a decision on that with that lens. And, that doesn't make them right, but it makes them act like an owner, not a renter.
Brian, maybe to wrap up, I was listening to an interview with John Malone recently on a podcast, and he was asked who is the best media CEO today, and he mentioned your name first. Congratulations. When you think about the success you've had and the success that Comcast has had, what keeps you motivated to continue to come to work every day and take on the challenges that the company and the industry face going forward?
First of all, it's incredibly gracious of John. And when my dad passed away, a number of people reached out and were really gracious. John, right at the top of the list. And ever since then, he has said that to me every time I see him. He says, you're doing a great job. And I think he just recently turned 80, and they had a little surprise video for him. And what I said is, and I'd say it here, is that everybody likes to hear they're doing a good job. It's a great reminder, whether it's true or not. It's an important motivator, regardless of who you are. And I think John Malone's doing a great job. And we've certainly had times where we've had to have, business things we've done together and things we've done apart. I once thought about when a lot of those founders of the cable business got out and something called DirecTV was coming in. And that's when Comcast really bought up a lot of cable properties in the U.S. because we were looking at competition not with, oh my goodness, but what a chance to really try to sharpen our skills. And I once heard, it was either the CEO of Coke or the CEO of Pepsi said, without the other, we would not be the company we are. And we've been better for it. And I thought, well, that can't be true. And as we've now lived competition for the last 30 years intensely, it motivates you. You want to win. And the people we attract want to get ahead of the competitor and do something better. And when we fall on our face, we pick ourselves up. And that may sound a bit sappy, but I really think it is, if you're going to go to work, you ought to believe in your products. It's really a privilege to have my job. So I'm proud to be here and hope to do it for a long time.
Well, thank you, Brian, for your time today. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Ben. Stay safe.